Rituals are significant in our daily life. They occupy particular positions in our hearts, from religious and festive occasions to the countless varieties of daily rituals people engage in. These rituals are practiced by many individuals as a result of traditions that have been passed down to them, and they will also practice them in turn. The beginning of numerous rites occurred in antiquity. Even while you can learn about the history of some of the most popular ones through books and online, there may still be many others that haven't been brought to your attention. Discover more about these 10 prehistoric practices in the following paragraphs. Number 10. The Indonesian hanging coffins. Living a week with the Indonesian death tribe in Indonesia, the hanging coffins are a popular tourist attraction. The majority of the excursions and tours that are offered in the area may be found online and include this as an attraction. Not only in Indonesia but also in China and the Philippines, hanging coffins are well known. Despite being strange burial customs, this procedure has been practiced in China since the 8th century. The idea that the dead should remain close to all the gods was one of the beliefs that guided this rite. The hanging coffins made it simple for the gods to access the deceased, especially when they were hung very high in the air. According to local law, Indonesian Torajans also believed that the shorter the distance to nirvana was, the higher the dead person's coffin should be placed. You can still travel to Indonesia to witness these coffins even if this rite is no longer carried out nowadays. Just keep your wits about you, they can be a little frightening at first. Number 9. Ancient Egypt's sacrifice of retainers. Unaccounted for. Old burial customs. Smithsonian Institution. The sinister fascination of the retainer sacrifice. The method of killing people had to be carefully planned. Retainer sacrifices were a part of burial rituals and elite tombs in Egypt and the Near East. Retainer sacrifice refers to the practice of sacrificing the servants so they can be buried with the king. All of the dynasty rulers' graves from Harta Ka were accommodated with subsidiary burials in one of the royal cemeteries at el Kharab. Blocks of interments extended from or surrounded the royal tombs. The relationships between the servants and the rulers are also based on the locations of the subsidiary tombs. Researchers assumed that the servants interred there were at least 25 years old when graves containing skeletal remains were discovered. This implies that some people might have chosen to rest with the king. Number 8. Rite of the Blood Eagle Death. Blood Eagle, the most deadly execution technique in history. The most ritualized and gruesome killing style was undoubtedly the Blood Eagle death ceremony, which was purportedly used by the Vikings. Because it was so horrific, academics and researchers doubt that performing it on a human body was even feasible. From the 11th to the 13th century, several prose and poetic works depicted this funeral rite in detail. During conflicts, the Nordic people would seize the victims. The following is how the blood eagle dies. Captors cut wide skin flaps and opened them, exposing the victim's back muscles. Wings were created by severing ribs from the spine and opening them to both sides. When the captors remove the undamaged lungs and place them over the wings, or stretched ribs, the rite is finished. The victims were already dead at the ritual's finish. Even though the final ritual is horrible, it wasn't regarded as cruel at the time. Actually, the Vikings employed this significant death rite to sacrifice their victims to the gods. Some people continue to observe Asatru, the old Viking religion. The religion, however, is incredibly calm, and all traces of this kind of savagery have been meticulously concealed from those who practice it. Number 7. The Benin Living Ghosts. Beyond human boundaries tracks the voodoo rituals of Benin's strange, robed beings known as Egingans were the living ghosts of Benin. The locals thought that these figures represented the souls of the deceased coming back to Earth. The majority of people thought that the Egingans' goal was to impart wisdom and words of counsel to the living. These live spirits from Western Africa must not come into contact with the living, or they may face fatal repercussions. The robed beings would enter towns and pronounce verdicts that were thought to be from the gods. The villagers revered these powerful beings and were afraid to touch them for fear of dying. Egingans may show up at any time and draw crowds, but locals were protected by village minders using sticks to make sure no one was touched. It appeared as though the dead were passing through the world of the living thanks to these living ghosts. They would speak in an unhuman falsetto voice with a high pitch. Rumors suggest that there are still some living spirits present. However, it's difficult to confirm or deny because this is such a covert religious movement. Number 6. The Taumogenesis. One of the fabled outcomes of people trying to bring their loved ones back to life was taumogenesis. It was a procedure that would take place whenever a resurrection method was employed to call out demons. Two spiritual beings and portals made by taumogenesis invaded the world of the living. The resurrected spirit would be one of the spiritual beings, and the demonic spirit would be the other. This procedure also creates a portal, allowing demonic energy to attach to the revived spiritual entity from another dimension. One of the spiritual beings would be the resurrected spirit, while the other would be the demonic spirit. Additionally, this method opens a doorway that enables demonic energy from another realm to affix to the restored spiritual creature. Number 5. Rituals of Maya bloodletting. The Maya's bloody and dangerous rituals, archaeology, Odyssey, particularly among the Maya, bloodletting and human sacrifice were widespread rites in Mesoamerican cultures. In Mayan bloodletting ceremonies, a specific bodily area was punctured and offered to the gods. For example, they decided on the mouth or cheek for women and the penis for men. Blood was drawn after the puncture and would later be burned as an offering. The beginning and end of each calendar cycle were the most frequent periods for the Mayans to execute these ceremonies, although they also took place on other major dates in their calendar. The following significant life phases necessitated bloodletting: king's accession to the throne, construction of dedication monuments, the start and finish of a conflict, the king's or queen's marriage, birth, or death. Number 4. The Pommelt rituals. PMMELTE, Stonehenge of Germany. New findings from a significant archaeological dig. Pommelt, known as the German Stonehenge, was said to have served as a location for different occult rites, just like the famous Henge in England. When researchers and experts examined the area, they discovered a wide range of intriguing buried artifacts and remains: 10 women and children's bodies, 4 of whom had significant head injuries and rib fractures. Burials in one of the earthen rings of the sites. Carefully arranged other objects buried include millstones, animal bones, and grinding stones. Researchers think these burials were connected to ritual sacrifices, even though the reason for them is a mystery lost to time. Number 3. The mysteries of Dionysus. In ancient Rome and Greece, a well-known ceremony was the Dionysian mysteries. It employed trance-inducing methods and intoxicants to lift inhibitions and social restrictions. The participants' liberation and restoration to the natural states were supposed to be the goals of the ceremony. Slaves, outsiders, and outlaws were all allowed to participate in the Dionysian mysteries, demonstrating how welcoming they were of marginalized members of Greek society. Just be careful not to mix up the Eleusinian mysteries with the Dionysian mysteries. They worship two quite distinct deities, despite the fact that they were both religious celebrations intended to honor Greek gods. The Dionysian mysteries were also shrouded in a great deal more mystery. As a result, there are still numerous mysteries that researchers are working to solve. Number 2. Japanese Utagaki. In the Japanese Shinto social ritual known as Utagaki, peasants would gather on mountaintops and engage in a variety of interactions with one another. Villagers would freely engage in sexual activity while singing, dancing, eating, and making ritual offerings to the local gods during these gatherings. It was believed that by engaging in this behavior, both men and women would experience virility and the blessing of the gods. It was also common to commemorate the beginning of fall or spring by reciting poetry. Unmarried people were thought to be able to find partners at Utagaki rites. The rituals were eventually banned due to the excessive unruliness by the ruling Buddhist government, though less sexualized variations of the tradition are still practiced in some regions of Japan. Number 1. The Babylonians' sacred marriage. Why romance and marriage were weird in ancient Mesopotamia. In Babylonia, sacred marriages meant that during religious rituals, people substituted for fertility gods. Hieros Gammus, often known as sacred sexual union ceremonies, were involved. The sacred union involved a recreation of the union between the fertility goddess Ishtar and the shepherd